So we'll be starting now. Is everyone ready? Okay,
Yes.
so good day, everyone. My name is Tim Dalmoni Andrew, and I'm a data analyst for UrBizEdge. So for today's session, I have a very special guest by the name of Ken Puls. So he's going to take us on topic several ways since Sunday. So let me just read a little bit about his profile. So Ken Paul is the president of Excelguru Consulting International, a company dedicated to helping users get the most of the data. His passion lies in exploring tools that turns data into information and teaching others how to benefit from them. Ten Pog basically has 20 years of training experience, with over 15 years being an MVP holder since 2002.
MVP, who's MVP?
Kempo is also a Kempo is a blogger, a software developer, and author. He has basically written so many books, so many books. I can't testify to that. Books like Monkey for Data, that's one of his most popular books. He has written books like Monkey for Data. Kenpo is also recognized in the community of Microsoft with a recognition award since 2006, being an MVP holder for both Excel and data platform category. So I'll hand the section over to Ken Paul now, but stop sharing my screen. So Ken,
All right.
okay,
Let
you're
me
next.
let me just share my screen here, and we will get this one going here. And I'm just going to move this over to the other side so I can watch the chat window as we go here. So awesome. I'm just going to go back one slide here because I do actually have a link up here, and I will share this link with you guys as well, so you can post it in the meetup group a little bit later on. But if anybody wants to go through and download the example files and the slides that I've got here, they are all already posted on my OneDrive here, so you can actually play with these examples after it's all done. So. Just a quick little intro to me. I mean, you already got one. I'm going to go through this really fast, but my name is Ken. I am an FCPA, FCMA in Canada. That means that I am a fellow of the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada. We actually started as certified management accountants. Was my branch a few years ago. All three designations in Canada merged into one, and I've been recognized by them as one of the leaders in my field, which is what got the F in front of my designation. So it's a pretty big honor. It's a nice thing to say. I have a financial accounting background that's official. I do run a little website called excelguru.ca. We have a website with a blog and a forum and help articles and all kinds of good stuff. We serve out about a million hits of information a year, just out there for free that we like to help people with. I am also a founding partner of skillwave.training. If you're looking for some of the best business intelligence training on the planet, you should definitely check out our site. We talk about Excel and Power BI, Power Query, Power Pivot, DAX, all kinds of good stuff there. So if you're looking for good style training, this is a place to go. As mentioned, I am a Microsoft MVP, have been since 2006. I've been awarded for 15 consecutive years now, which is really hard to believe. I still remember the first one like it was yesterday. But I've actually been awarded in multiple different categories spanning across Excel and Data Platform, which is the category that looks after Power BI, before coming back into the Office Apps and Services, which is what they actually call the platform that looks after Excel today. So I've been around Microsoft for a long time. I know a lot of program managers inside. I have people that I can actually get my questions answered or submit bugs or feature requests to, which is a pretty awesome thing and something I very much enjoy. I am also, as mentioned, a software developer and an author. I've written a software package called Monkey Tools, which is an add-in for Excel. I've actually written 3 books. I won't talk about the first one because it's really boring. The second one was M is for Data Monkey, and the third one is this one here that you can see on screen, which is Master Your Data for Excel and Power BI. This is the second edition of M is for Data Monkey, completely rewritten, twice the size of what the previous book was, just released in PDF format about a month ago. Super proud of this book. Really looking forward to seeing this actually come out in print in about a month or so. Coming up. So it's pretty exciting stuff. So that's about me. I am going to just let you know that all of the demos that I'm going to go through today do exist in some of my other products that are out there. Everything that we're going to look at today is actually within Chapter 18 of Master Your Data. There's actually more in Chapter 18 than just what I'm going to show you here, but everything you're going to see here is in that. So if you're looking for some alternate views of the way that this actually works, you can pick up that book. As of the next update that we're doing for our Power Query Academy product, which is a video product, we are actually going to be adding a new module for allocations that's going to have every one of these examples that I'm going to show you. So that's coming up very soon. And in addition, my Power Query recipes cards also have as well. So if you're interested in finding any of those things, you can do that at Skillwave's training shop right here. The other thing to know about the Power Query Academy is that if you do pick that up, it has the full video of all of these different things that are coming up. It also includes the book and the recipe cards as well, so you get lots of different views of the same material. So that's enough about that. Let's talk about what the topic is for today. So what the heck does several ways from Sunday even mean anyway? And this is kind of interesting because for me, the expression that I know is actually 7 ways from Sunday. And when I was actually doing, pulling all this stuff together, one of the things we do when we're trying to build these presentations is we like to come up with catchy titles for our stuff. But I always like to try and throw these into a search engine to see what comes up. And I actually discovered that this term is actually a very North American-based term, and it doesn't actually mean something to a lot of people around the world. So I thought I should probably give a brief description of what the heck this actually is all about. So the term's actually evolved over time, but basically what it is normally you'll find that the original expression is something along the lines of 6 ways from Sunday. The challenge is that you can find it using all kinds of different versions, 2 ways, 3 ways, 1,000 ways from Sunday. It can be from, it can be to Sunday, but the one big consistency here is that the day that's used in this expression is always Sunday. And basically what it means today is it means a great many ways or every way possible for doing something. So there you go. It's a term that's actually been around for a long time. It's evolved. You can actually check it out at Grammarist here. There's a good description there. There's others out there as well. But basically, what I wanted to do with this is I wanted to use that sort of as the sort of the theme, I guess, for holding this together. Although, what I will say is today's examples, not a single one of them actually starts on Sunday. Okay, there's Sundays in them though. What I am going to do here is I'm going to show multiple different ways to allocate values based on dates. All right, so this is how the time is, or timing, or the sort of thread that goes in here. We got multiple different ways to do things. They have dates. Sundays are dates. There we go. There's the tie-in. I thought it was catchy. I'm going to go with that. So that's the thought process behind what I actually had to work here along the way. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go look at some content. So the first thing that I want to do is, as an accountant, I actually get a lot of questions about this when I'm actually teaching people how to do things. Is we go through and we talk about Power Query, we talk about financial structures and a bunch of different things going on. And invariably, I get back to this question, hey, I've got a whole bunch of transactions, either purchases or sales, and I need to allocate them across different periods. How do I do it? So this presentation is going to go through several different ways of actually allocating depending on what your needs are. And the first one we're going to start with is this. I've got a little table with some clients that have some revenue here. They've purchased something, and we've got a start date and end date for the product or services that they've purchased, and we need to allocate it across individual months. So my goal here is to allocate the revenue based on the number of days that go to each month end within this period. In other words, what I'm looking for is I'm looking to create the table on the right from the table on the left. And the big key here is that there are 78 days that Abdullah's revenue profile actually cover here. And we need to separate it up like this. We've got to put 16 days in June because it's June 15th to June 30th. We've got to put 31 days in July and 31 days in August and allocate it evenly based on that pattern. Pauline's records all go to June. But Nicholas's actually span across 5 months with 4 days from June 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th being in June, 31 days in July and August, 30 in September, and then the final 26 from October 1st through 26 go to October. So this is the pattern that I'm actually looking for to replicate here. And what we're going to do is we're going to hop over to a demo right now. So let's go and take a look at what we actually have. So here we go. Just to sort of go through this as well, if there's questions that come up as we go along, fire them into the chat window. I'll take a break at the end of every one of these examples as well if there's other questions that come up, and then we can deal with them by voice at that time as well. But for right now, I'm just going to keep on soldiering on here. The first thing that I want to look at before we get started is we need to pull our data into Power Query because, as you can see on the right-hand side of my Queries and Connections pane, while I've set up some folders in advance, what I haven't done is actually connected to my data. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this table, and this is the same table I'm going to use for every example here. And I'm going to go right-click on it and just choose Get Data from Sheet. Now, you may or may not have this button here, depending on whether or not you're on Office 365. So you might have to go to the Data tab and choose from Table or from Sheet. But regardless, we're going to pull this in. And here we go. I've got my data. And I'm now going to go and make just a very quick change to this. One of the things that drives me absolutely nuts about Excel when it brings this in is that they always change my dates to date times. I hate that. I want dates. I said it was dates. They're all round numbers. They should be interpreted as dates. So there we go. I'm just going to override those two things, set them up, and I'm going to go and rename this guy here, and I'm going to call it raw data-sales. Okay, so this is the original query that I've got that I'm going to go and put into my raw data folder here just to keep it organized. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to commit this query and lock it in, but I want to make sure that it gets loaded as a connection only query. Okay, so this is going to be a stage. It's not going to load to a worksheet. We don't need that anywhere. And basically, I just want to get it ready to go as the basis for all of the other transformations that I'm going to do. So that's just a sort of, groundwork, global prep work we're going to do here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to try and create this table here that allocates by dates, basically as you saw on the slide deck, so that we actually have all of our revenues allocated properly. So to do that, I'm going to go right click on raw data, and I'm going to choose to create a reference to that query. And what that will do is it will make me a new query that points to raw data-sales. I'm just going to rename this one. I'm going to call this one month underscore X underscore days, just so that I know what the heck it is. And this is going to be one of my allocation methods. For this example, I don't need the periods and frequency. I'm just going to get rid of them. We'll use those later. So the big thing that I need to do right now is I need to try and figure out how much revenue is going to be allocated to each individual day as we go through this. So basically what I need to do is take my and I need to divide this by the number of days in this period. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create myself a custom column. So we'll go to Add Column, Custom Column. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a new column called Amount. And in my amount, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sales and I'm going to divide it. Now, next thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to press enter. I'm going to do this on the next line. I always prefer to sort of break my queries up a little bit. I wish Excel sort of handled this nicely natively, but unfortunately it doesn't. You can do Alt Enter to make line breaks, but it's kind of hard to read. Power Query's interface here is a little bit better for that, although the IntelliSense is not as good. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to open a parenthesis here, and I'm going to use this little formula. I'm going to go with int64.from, and we're going to pick up the end date column. Now, what is this? int64 is basically the process we're doing is we're taking the value in the end date column and we're converting it from a date back into the date serial number that you would see in Excel if you formatted it with, say, a comma style or something like that. So to do that, we can use a formula called number.from. The reason why I've picked int64 is that int64 pulls back a whole number. So it basically rounds it off right away. And that way I can actually use date times from this area here and it'll still work. If I tried to use number.from, it brings me decimals, and that's going to blow things up a little bit later on in patterns. So I'm actually working on standardizing right now with int64 when I'm converting to numbers. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. We're going to grab our int64 start date. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're also going to add 1. And the reason being on this is because when you go and you subtract one date from the other, we need to add one more day back in order to get the correct answer in order to divide our sales up properly. So when we go and we say, okay, you'll notice that I now get my revenue per day for this period showing up quite nicely. So that's good. Now what I need to do is I need to actually expand this based on the number of days in each month end. And to do this, I'm actually going to create a list that gives me all of the days individually between these two dates. Once again, this is going to be done with a custom column. So I'm going to call this one end of month because that's what I need eventually. And I'm going to create what we call a list in Power Query. So we do that, we start with a curly brace. I'm going to again go back and use an int64 to get the date serial number for this time the start date first. Okay, so convert the start date to a date serial number, and then we're going to run from there. We use two periods in Power Query. In Excel, we would use a colon, but this is like the colon lying down. And we now go with int64.from, and we're going to go to the end date. Oh, and then we close off our curly brace to close off the list. Now, if you've never worked with Power Query before, or even if you have worked with Power Query before, but you've never worked with lists before, this is going to look a little bit weird. But basically what happens is when you do this, you get a nice list of date serial numbers. And this isn't the complete list, it's just a preview. But the cool thing from here is that we actually have every single day from June 15th, June 16th, June 17th, all the way through this. Every one of these tables has a list like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to expand this to new rows, and we now get, well, we get a whole bunch of date serial numbers. So you know what we're going to do is we're going to convert this to a data type so you can see what's actually happened. So there we go, June 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and so on. Every single day, all the way up, if I scroll down Abdullah's records here, all the way up to August 31st, which is right down here. Okay, so there we are, August 31st record for Abdullah. Every single day in that period. Why this is super, super useful is because now we can actually go and set this one here. We can say, hey, let's go to transform, date, month, end of month, and we can now flip this out to an end of month. And I now have the individual amount for every single day in the period, but it's assigned to the correct end of month. With this in place, what I can do is I can now group the data back up to group my amount by end of month. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, let's grab our clients. Let's grab the sale. Let's grab the starting date. Let's grab the end of month. We'll go to transform and group by. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, let's sum the amount column. And I think I'm just going to call this one amount as well, because that's really what I'm going after. And at that point, boom, there we go. We've now nicely grouped everything up by the month ends, so we know what days are actually going where and all the rest of it. So the only thing I really need for the example that I was actually working with is the date, the end of month, and the amount. Right-click, remove other columns, and at this point, my data is finished. So I can go home, close and load to, and I can actually load this to a table on an existing worksheet. I'll just go and drop it right down here in row 16. And we can see that, there we go, if we compare these tables, with the exception of the decimal precision, this one here is actually much more complete. You can see that we've actually managed to walk through. Now, the interesting part around this is actually a pattern that you can apply to data as long as you know what the steps are. And this is actually one of the things in our Power Query recipe cards. By the end of September, our next update will actually include the pattern on exactly how to do this. So basically, whatever data set you're working with, as long as you can actually follow the recipe for it, you'll be able to actually apply it and allocate it based on the days in this particular area. Christian jokes that I should talk to somebody who can get the Power Query team to change the default. Yeah, I've brought that up. I've discussed it before. I don't think it's a high priority for them. Glad you can see that there's a use for int64. I actually I didn't really use int64 a lot until actually working through this examples. It actually saved my bacon a couple of times. So yeah, more and more I'm actually looking at it going, I think I'm probably going to standardize on int64 instead of number.from, unless I need to keep the decimal precision. At that point, then I would use number.from. But when you need whole numbers, int64 is better. Also, the fact that it does not carry decimal precision means if it gets loaded to something like Power Pivot, it will be more efficient because it doesn't carry the decimals with it. So there's some good uses there and whatnot. So I don't see any other questions in the chat at this point in time. I don't see any. Yeah, all the calendar patterns today are done with number.from. You're absolutely right, Christian. That may end up changing. So keep that in mind. So I don't see any other questions in here. So unless anyone does throw up their hand in the next second here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the next example because I've got a whole bunch that I actually want to get through today here in order to keep moving forward. So any other questions and comments, keep them coming into the chat, and we can break in as we're going through here. So the next pattern I want to show you is this one. We have the same data, But in this case, I want to, yes, Louise, the resources, I will share a link at the end of this with the organizers to post on Meetup, where you can download all the slides and all of the example files, absolutely. All right, so this particular one here, my goal is slightly different. What I want to do is I want to allocate my revenue evenly based on to each month end, but based on the total number of month ends in this period. In other words, what I want to do is I want to generate something that looks like this. So you'll notice here that in the previous example, we actually allocated revenue on a daily basis. This time around, we have 3 months that Abdullah's records cover, June, July, and August. So I want to allocate evenly across June, July, and August. I don't care that there's only 15 days in June. If there's an entry in that month, that's where I want to put it. Pauline, everything was in June, so she only gets 1 record. Nicholas, he spanned across 5 months from June through October. We're going to allocate it evenly across 5 months. All right, so just some different ways of actually looking at this. And this is one thing I'll tell you from my experience is if there's one way to allocate things, accountants will find 5 because it all depends on how you ask or who's in control what they actually want. So this is the next one we're going to look at. And this guy, it's going to take a little bit more work because the way that I do this is I actually go through the process of generating a custom function to calculate the number of month ends in a given period. And the reason being is because Power Query doesn't actually really have a native function to say how many month ends are in here. So let's go take a look at this one here. On this guy, you can see the data footprint that we're actually looking for. It looks like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off and start building this guy out. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my raw data sales again. We'll start from the same source. And I'm going to make myself a new query this time, which is going to be called evenly to, whoops, let me try and spell that correctly, evenly to months. Okay. Now, and I didn't even put my my S on that. These are the small things that bother me as an accountant. All right, there we go. Now, I'm going to get rid of, again, periods and frequency. I don't need that for this example. Again, we'll come back to those a little bit later. But the thing that's important to me right now is I actually want to load this one to a destination on the worksheet before I get started with the rest. So I'm going to go to close and load to. I'm going to put it on the table. I'm going to drop it over here. Even though I've made no changes whatsoever, okay, I'm just going to drop that here for right now. And you'll see why when we come back and start playing around with things a little bit later. So the first thing that I've got to try and figure out is I've got to figure out what is my allocation that I'm going to be working with that goes to each month end. So I need to divide this by the number of months between these two dates. The problem is, again, Power Query doesn't have a function to calculate the number of month ends between two dates. So I'm going to create one. So what's going to happen is I'm going to start up here and we're going to start with manage parameters. I'm going to go create a new parameter. And this new parameter, I'm going to name it something super insightful like from date. The very first time I did this, I went straight and set the data type as a date. My pattern does not do that. As a matter of fact, it specifically says don't use a date, use any instead. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and throw a date in here. So we're going to go with 2020, I don't know, 07-25, 27. Here we go. So that's the first one. I'm now going to create a second new parameter. And we're going to call this one to date. The only secret with to date is that it has to be later than from date. So we're going to go 2021, 08, what's today, 29th. There we go, that'll work. I've got both of these guys set up. So if I go and check this one out, July 27th and August 29th. The big secret about this, the date format that you enter here must be in the date format that your computer uses. So if you're in the US, you would use month, day, year. I have no idea what the standard date format is in Nigeria. It could be day, month, year. It could be something else. My computer, I set to ISO standard, which is year, month, day, because I hate that confusion. So whatever it is that you use by standard, that's the format that you want your dates in here. And if you say okay and everything works out correctly, well, then the pattern will work. Day, month, year. Okay, cool. So you'd go with day, month, year if you're working in Nigeria. So, all right. I've now got my two parameters, so this is good. I'm now going to use them, and here's how this is going to work. We're going to go right-click, and we're going to choose New Query from Other Sources from Blank Query. So just a note to all of you folks that are here, and I see I've got a couple that are actually throwing me the day month here right now. I'm very aware, but I also want you guys to know this. There is only one country in the world that has an official date standard of month, day, year, and Canada is not it, right? It's the U.S. Just to be real clear on that, we get tarnished with that all the time, but we actually, our official date format is also day, month, year. Although if you ask 5 Canadians what our official date format is, you'll get 6 different answers because none of us actually know that. So just kind of fun trivia around there about how confused Canadians can be about certain things. All right. I have created myself a new blank query now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my parameters here. So once again, you're going to see the same kind of things happening a lot of times here. I'm going to create a list. And it's going to start with int64.from because I'm going to go and convert my from date into a date serial number. And then I'm going to create a list that goes from there up to another int64 to the to date. Okay, so basically at this point, what I'll get is I'll get a list that spans from here to here. The big secret on this is you cannot use dates to make a list from one date to another. You have to use numbers for this unless you're using a very specific function that we'll look at later. So by converting these into the date serial numbers, we can create this list, which we can then, as quickly as possible, click this big to table button, and then click OK, because this dialog is just here to slow you down. At that point, we now get our table of dates, which we can convert to be a date. We can then take this column, transform, date, month, end of month, so that we get our month-end dates that span from July 27th to August 31st. Obviously, there's a lot of duplicates in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right-click and remove duplicates. I'm now down to the 2 month-end dates from this range, because there are only 2. And now I can go and say, hey, let's go and rename this to be end of month. There we go. Now we want to see if this works. So I'm just going to go back to my from date here, and I'm just going to change this. We'll change this back to, I don't know, let's go 0603, for example. Okay. We'll go back to query 1, which I'm going to rename, and look at that. Boom. Now we've got our 3 individual month ends over there as well. So I'm going to go and rename this to get month ends. So I've got a nice little sample parameter or sample query that I've actually built here that will take these 2 parameters. Now, one of the things that I will tell you about working with parameters that really confused me at the beginning is that I always ended up spending a ton of time trying to figure out how to dynamically feed these guys with dates from my stuff. You don't actually need to do that. These are basically like variables that we set with an initial value. And that initial value is actually wiped when you go and use it in a function that just uses the variable at that point. Why is this important? Well, because now we can do this. Because we've built a query that references parameters, it enables this button here, create function. And when we do this, it comes back and says, oh, you want to create a function. The parameters are the from date and the to date. So it's going to feed from these guys here. What do you want to call it? I'll say, let's call it fx get month ends. And there we go. We get a nice new function. It puts it all into a group here. Okay, I'm just going to move that into my functions folder. At least I'm going to try. Come on. Oh, you know you can do it. Oh, Power Query, come on. Let's go move. There we are. That's better. Now, the big thing that's really important here is that it takes a from date. It takes a to date, ironically marking it as optional, even though the parameters were required, but whatever. Now that we have this, I can actually make use of this for my allocations. Here's how it works. If I go back to evenly to months now, I can go add column, invoke custom function. This is what do you want to use? I'm going to use the fx get month ends function that I just wrote. Now, this is the one really big danger when you're working with this particular function. Because I've used an any data type for this, it does a really poor job of mapping my columns. If I had actually used date as a data type, it would have obviously, or it would have already said, hey, you want to use the start date column and the end date column. Now, it does them in order and whatnot, but with any, it's got no idea. So the important thing you got to recognize is that you do need to use a column name. Now, this is already set to 1, but the next one's not. So I'm going to change that from any to column name. And then we have to pick the right column. And if you mess that up, well, things look really, really weird. So trust me on this, because when I was writing this example, what did I do? I messed it up, and I spent a whole bunch of time trying to scratch in my head, trying to figure out why did I do this wrong. So here we go. We've got it set to start date and end date. And now when we click OK, we get a table here. Now, if I click in the white space beside it, you'll notice that my table is dynamically returning from June to August, except that based on the variables I used, that was exactly what you saw. So maybe it's not dynamic. Let's find out. Let's go look at this one. That one just goes from June to June. And this one goes from June to October. So this function here is doing all of the work. But this guy here is basically just a sample that you could go back to play around with these. And the really interesting part around this, in the example file that I'm providing to you, I've left these around, but what's really interesting is if you delete the get month ends query and you delete both of these guys once you're done with it, it's always important to delete the sample first, then the parameters, not the parameters in the sample, or else you bugger this one up, okay? But the interesting part here is that this function now still works, okay? So all of those pieces were just helpers to build your function. They're not required once you go through. And this is the mysterious and interesting part around working with parameters is you get to set initial values for your debugging and testing, but when those parameters are actually used inside a function, they're always empty, and you have to feed them based on your data. So they're already dynamic, which is kind of an interesting thing around functions, I think. All right. Now, we have these little tables. Before I go and expand them, I actually want to do something really important, because remember, my goal was to try and figure out how to allocate my sales across these month ends. So what I need to do now is I need to take this number and divide it by the number of rows in each one of these tables. Now, the cool thing is that I've already figured out what function you need to do this. And does it say when you get to my recipe cards and whatever else and whatnot, if you're interested in picking those up, that function's already written there. But it basically is this. We're going to go and calculate our amount by taking the sale and dividing that by, and the function we actually need here is called table. It really helps to spell these right. Row count, table.row count. And then we'll feed it the table that's nested in each row of the FX get month ends column. So what will happen here is that on every row, it's going to evaluate how many rows are in this table. So there's 3, there's 1, there's 5. We'll take that value and use it as the divisor for sale. And now you see we get 50, because 150 divided by 3 is 50, 100 divided by 1 is 100, and 200 divided by 5 is 40. So we've now got our amount here. And now the beautiful thing that we can actually deal with here is we can go and just expand our get month ends. We'll get rid of this original column name as prefix. Nobody cares about that. For reference, if I left this checked, I'd get FX get month ends dot end of month. Ooh, yuck. So I'm just going to get rid of the prefix. It'll open it up nicely. There's the end of the month. Every single row of the nested table inherits the other properties that are around, including the amount. So now basically I can go and grab my client, my end of month, my amount, right click, remove other columns. I've now broken my 150 across each month end, my 100 across each month end, there was only one, and my 200 across each month end here. The last thing I'm going to do with this example, I'm going to Control A to select all columns, detect data type, that does all the data types all at once, and now I can go and say home, close and load. And what you'll see is that this table is now going to transform. Drives me crazy that it does these kind of things. Let me go and delete and shift those columns left. There we go. And that's going to mess up my examples that I had hidden over here as well. But hey, there we go. So as you can see now, we've actually got all of this set up, and the results are exactly consistent with what we actually had before. So see, look at this, Kristen, you're still sticking around. I think here you are on vacation learning more about Power Query, and I'm glad to know that I'm showing you stuff you haven't seen before. So, and Michael's enjoying the use on functions there too. Cool. This is always good. Yeah, functions are interesting, and I got to say, I've always written them manually. I haven't really used the parameters a lot on a lot of these different things, but the more that I play around with them and the more that I actually start doing different things, the more use cases I'm actually finding for working with them. And I actually kind of like the build up once I got used to playing around, how they actually all sort of work together. So, Other questions? I don't see any other questions coming in. Again, don't see any hands up. So I'll tell you what, let's move on to the next one. Okay. So yet another wrinkle. This one here does not have an end date column, but we do have a number of months column. Okay. So the goal here is that we're going to go and allocate this evenly over X number of month ends from the start date. So basically well, we'll come into exactly how that looks, but I want to add an additional nuance to this because this is a very accounting type thing to do. I'm going to shift the first allocation month if the revenue is earned after the 15th of the month. Okay, so in the case of Abdullah and Pauline's records, what I want to do, so you can see this is the format that we're going for, where we're going to split this up. So we're going to allocate over 3 months for Abdullah, 1 for Pauline, and 4 for Nicholas in this case. Okay, because that's what we got on our table. But the important thing to recognize here is that the beginning month for both Abdullah and Pauline, the first month for our allocation is going to go to June. And the reason being is because when the client purchased their services, they purchased them on the 15th of the month or earlier. In the case of Nicholas, though, Nicholas bought his on June 27th. So because only 4 days are left, 3 days, 4 days, depending on how you count, are left inside June, it doesn't make any sense to allocate a full month of revenue to Nicholas or to his services for June. We'll say, hey, look, you know what, he just prepaid for the next month, and we'll allocate over the 4 months starting July. Okay, so just one more way to go through and deal with this kind of stuff. So here's how this one's going to look. We're going to jump over and take a look, and now I'm going to see just how badly I've actually messed up my my thing here. So I love when Power Query goes and shifts my tables around on me and whatnot. I tell you, it just drives you crazy, some of the things that happen. So let's just ungroup those guys there, ungroup those columns, and get it back to where it's supposed to be and group this one up. All right, and group column. There we go. Okay, so this is the format that I'm looking for. So once again, what we're going to do is we're going to go right click and reference our sales table. We'll bring this into Power Query. I'm going to rename this one here. So this is going to be over X months. I'm going to move this guy up into the top here as well. For this example, once again, I'm going to get rid of the columns that I don't need. So I'm actually going to drop the end date and the frequency. I don't need either of these guys here. So we're going to get rid of those. And my periods, I'm going to rename, and we're just going to call this one months. Okay, so basically what we've got here, we've got Abdullah's record, $150 of sales, a start date, and how many months we want to allocate this over. Okay, now, the first thing we need to do, we need to figure out how much are we going to allocate to each month. Honestly, this is the easy part in this one because it's just sale divided by month. So I'm going to grab the sale column. We'll grab the months column. We're going to go to add column, standard, and divide. And there we go. We now have our amount. So that one's fairly straightforward. The big question now is, how do we get these allocated to the right number of months? How do we generate the list of months that we need so that we can expand these tables in Power Query? So once again, I'm going to reach out to my recipe pattern. And this one, basically, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new custom column here, which is, I'm just going to leave it called custom actually, and it's going to look like this. I'm going to start by saying, depending on where the start date is, that's going to dictate what I do. So I'll write the formula first, and then we'll take a look at it. So we're going to go with if date.day, and we'll grab the start date. If date.day is greater than 15, then what we're going to do is we're going to create a list of the dates that we need. So we're going to start with our curly brace. And what I want to do is I want to go from 1 to the months column. Okay, so that's the list that I'm going to generate if our date is greater than 15. So in the case of Nicholas here, for example, we're going to create a list that goes from 1 to 4. On the other hand, both Abdullah and Pauline, the date is not greater than the 15th. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a different list, which is going to go from 0 to the number of months minus 1. Okay. So in this case, what you're going to see is that because we've got the 15th, which is not greater than the 15th, we're going to create a list that goes from 0 up to 2, 3 minus 1. So when we go and take a look, you can see that our list here indeed goes from 0 to 2, Pauline goes from 0 to 0, and Nicholas goes from 1 to 4. The whole deal around this guy here is all about making sure that our list has the correct values. So let me just expand this to new rows. Now you can see them nicely. Okay, so it expands and gets us a new row for each individual piece. What I want to do now is I actually want to go and generate the month end on this guy here. So here we go. We're going to go custom column, and we're going to build ourselves a month end. And that month end is going to look like this. We're going to go date dot end of month. And you'll notice that I never go and commit the IntelliSense on this because it gives me really weird formulas when I do. But we'll go date dot end of month, and then we're going to go with date dot add months. And what date dot add months does is it takes our start date, and we will add the number of months in the custom column. And we'll go back and just close the parenthesis off here. So when we do this, we now get the correct month end. Okay, so basically what we're doing is we're taking the date here, we're adding the number of months that you see in the custom column. So in this case, we're adding 0 months, and then we're converting it to the end of the month. In the case of Nicholas's, where we shifted, what this means is the first date, June, we're adding 1 month to it, which makes July 27th, and then we convert that into the end of month, which gives us July 31. So that's how we actually can shift the dates on these guys here. So once again, we can grab the client, we can grab the month end, we can grab the amount. Notice the order I selected that, client, month end, and amount. Right click, remove other columns. It now comes up, client, month end, amount, just the way I selected it. And once again, Control A, we're going to go transform, detect data types, and everything's set up nicely for this guy here. So that's the pattern for how we actually just shift them straight out to month ends rather than be allocating them by day to it or whatnot. And now we're going to go home, close, and load. We're going to load this guy to a table. And there we go. And I'll throw it right down here. And you can see the output from this guy here is exactly what we actually had in this particular piece right here as well. So that gives us the answer to that particular pattern as well. So and again, you know, as I say, in our patterns and whatever else that we actually have out there for different things, you know, there's a recipe that goes behind this and whatnot that actually shows exactly how to go through and deal with all these pieces. So. I don't see any questions coming up on this one here, so I'll tell you what. Let's keep soldiering forward because I still have a couple more examples I want to get through in the next 15 minutes here that shows even more ways of dealing with different things. So here's another one. Let's say that you go to I don't know, some kind of a theme park like Disney World, or maybe you go skiing and you buy a pass that actually allows you consecutive days of access to the fun park that you're actually going with. So our goal here is to basically say whatever way you want to actually start off here, whatever day you start, your passes are going, the revenue from your passes is going to be realized over the next consecutive number of days. So in other words, what we want is we want a list that looks like this at the end of it. So you can see here that Amadou's records are going to go over 2 days. The first day that Amadou showed up was on June 30th, and we're going to allocate that evenly over the next 2 days. Rasima was over 5 days, beginning on June 27th, and Juan was over 4 days, starting on July 2nd. So let's go and take a look at how this one works. Let me expand my data and let me clean this one up again so that we can actually see what's going on inside this, and move it all back here. Man, I tell you, I need to go and talk to my friends at Excel and ask them to stop shifting my dates the same way here. Group that, we'll go on to group this, and then we'll get this back to where I actually wanted it, which was like that. There we go. Precision is beautiful. Okay, so how do we generate this one? What do we actually use for this? Well, again, we're going to go back and we're going to start with the same data once again. So I'm going to right click and reference my raw data sales. And for this guy, I'm going to rename the query here, and this one's going to be over X days. So here we go. And on this one, the pieces that I don't need the end date and the frequency again. We'll get rid of that, and we're going to rename our periods. This time we'll just call it days. So the data is going to be slightly different than what you saw on the slide, but that's okay. The pattern works regardless, and that's the beauty of patterns. So basically, the first part, again, what we're going to do is we need to generate the amount that we're going to allocate to each day. So what's going to happen? We're going to grab sale and days. Once again, add column, standard divide, and quickly rename it to amount. Nice and easy. That part's out of the way. Now the question is, how do we allocate this to each individual day? Now there's a function for this one, and this one's built into Power Query. So I'm going to go custom column, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a new column called date, and this one uses a very specific function which you may or may not have heard of, which is called list.dates. Now, I don't use this one a lot, to be honest with you, because I generally prefer building calendars and things like that by creating my own list, but this is really, really handy for this example. The list.date takes a start date, so we're going to feed it that, and then it says, what's the count as a number? So basically, if you're creating a list of dates, how many individual dates do you want? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, we need the number of days for our dates. And then it says, okay, cool. Well, what's the step that you're going to use for this one here? We say, well, hey, you know what? I want to step it every one, right? So we're going to use 3 dates. Give me a step of 1 day at a time. And we're going to go and say, okay. And this is the frustrating part about this is when you do that, you get an error. And it comes back and it says, hey, we can't convert 1 to a type of duration. What is that all about? So this is the tricky part around working with Power Query sometimes, specifically when working with functions, is that you need to know how to actually create the item that's going on in here. So in order to generate a duration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this hash duration. All right, so this is the M code structure behind creating a duration. And it would be really nice if the IntelliSense would kick in here and show me what I actually need. For some reason, it's not going to. But let's put 1 in our duration and see what actually happens. And we still get an error. So what is going on here? And it says the duration actually needs 4 parameters or arguments passed to it, and you only gave it 1. So this is the secret to understanding your duration, is that the duration itself actually needs 4 different components. And I'm going to put these in as zeros. Okay, so basically what this is days, hours, minutes, seconds is what's actually going in here. You got to provide all of them. At least you got to provide all of them most of the time, and that's probably the worst part of this thing. When I go and say okay, you'll notice that it now gives me, again, a list. Unlike the int64s, this one actually gives me a list of dates in my format. So you'll notice we got 3 with a step of 1. There you go. We've got June 15th, 16th, and 17th. Over here, we've just got June 10th. Over here, we've got June 27th through the 30th. So I can now go and say, hey, that's pretty cool. Let's expand to new rows. And believe it or not, this example is pretty much done because I can grab the client, the date, the amount, right-click, remove other columns. There's the table. So if you want consecutive dates for a certain iteration, list.dates is fantastic. Works really, really well. Once again, Control A, transform, detect data types. Everything looks like it's set up nicely. So now I can go and I can load this guy out to a table. So we go, home, close and load to, and we'll go and load this one out to a table on an existing worksheet. And there we go. So again, you can see the format is exactly the same here. Now, interestingly enough, it is also the same as what we have on here. This is just the metrics and the way that it's actually worked. But we'll come into an example. I'll show you once I get through all of these guys, what happens when we get into a refresh and how these things are actually different, even though they look the same right now. The one big difference, the dates are different. Notice these are over consecutive days where these are actually over month ends. Now, do we have any questions? Thank you, Romulus. I appreciate that that vote of confidence. That's awesome. Is it possible to create a function parameter to create a range of calendar dates? So basically, what you're asking me, I guess, on this one, Louise, is if I want to build up. Well, here, I'll tell you what. I'm just going to I'm going to take a quick sidebar on this, and I'm absolutely going to do this because why the heck not? So let's do this. So Louise's question is, can I actually use a custom function to create a list of dates between 2 dates? Why not? Let's create a new parameter. I'm going to recreate my my from date over here. So here's from date. I would generally do, actually, I'm not going to do this. I would generally do this as a date normally, but I'm not going to do that only because I already have a function here that references from date. And I don't want to blow anything up by doing that. So I'll go with 0602, and then I'm going to make another one called to dates. And this one, I'll go 2021 08 27. All right. So there's my from date and to date. I'm going to throw them back into the FX get month ends because they do go with that. But I'm going to create a new function here to do this. So we can go new query from other sources, blank query. Okay. You want from January through December. So bear with me on this, and I'll show you why I'm not doing. I'll show you why I'm not doing from January through December. Here's the reason. If I now go and say int64.from, okay, and we're going to go and pick up the from dates. Close that off, and we'll go int64.from, and we'll go to the to date. All right. So there's my list. I'll convert this to a table. We'll say okay. We'll convert this to a date. We'll call it date. And bingo, at this point in time here, this is get dates. And if I now go and say create function fx get dates, there we go. I now have a get dates function that uses from date and to date. And now if I reference my raw data over here and I say add invoke custom function, we'll use fx get dates. And I appreciate I'm going super, super fast on this, but give me the start date to the end date. Basically what's going to happen now is I'm going to go and get all of the dates between these two things here. So yes, I can absolutely create a calendar table that's going to work between these two guys, and this will generate these things individually for every one of these. Now, if that's not what you're actually meaning, you're saying, hey, I actually want to create a calendar table that goes and spans different things. The only difference is I might use a query to actually feed what's going on between these, and I would actually potentially write it manually. What I'll say on that one is that I definitely create calendar tables all the time using custom setups for that. That's also covered in Chapter 18 of Master Your Data. That's a big piece of what we actually do in there. But yeah, the fluidity on this one is quite good. There's a lot of different things that we can actually do along the way here. So I hope that sort of answers the question. I mean, there's so many different ways you can actually play with this one. Awesome. Okay, let's go and look at our last example that I actually have for you then. So already done that one. Here we go. This is the one we're looking for. So just one more way, okay? I've already given you 4. I'm going to give you a 5th way to actually go and allocate values over interesting pieces here. So in this one, slightly different. What I've got is I have a schedule of payments here or balances that somebody has incurred with us, and we've been having trouble getting payments out of them. So we've gone back and we've negotiated with them to split up their balance and pay us over a certain number of intervals. So ABC company says, look, I'll give you 2 payments, but I got to pay you 14 days apart for my cash flow. Acme, they need to pay us, every 30 days, a 5th of what they're dealing with and stuff like that. So the intention here is to divide this into an equal number of payments and then allocate one payment every X days from whatever the start date is that we negotiate with them to say this is when it's going to start. So in other words, what we're looking for is we're looking to create this. And the big deal here is we're looking for 2 payments, 14 days apart, June 30th and July 14th. For Acme, we got 5 payments, 30 days apart. Notice June 27th. And this is the interesting part, July 27th, August 26th, because remember, there's 31 days in July. There's 31 days in August, so the next payment date is going to be September 25th. This is not the 27th of the month. It's 30 days after. Okay, so that's the big key to remember there. If you want it to be on the 31st, we can use other patterns for that. And this one here, 7 days apart. Okay, so that's where we're going to go for our last example. Let's go and hop over here. We'll expand the data and let me just go and clean this one up as well. Let's make that about 11. There we go. That looks a little bit better, and I won't bother with the grouping. Okay, so the output for this is going to look very similar to the output that we have here, but the dates are going to be different because of the iterations and intervals that we're actually using instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right-click on raw data sales one more time and reference it. And for this guy, I'm going to make a query here, which is called X times at Y intervals. Oh, it's good name as any. And we'll throw that up in here. For this one here, the only column that I don't need in this case here is there we go, and we'll say get rid of the end date. Christian, if you want to steal that last example to impress your financial people, by all means, that's why I show you here, is I want you guys to adapt this to your own work, right? It's all about how to get it done. So, all right, let's rename periods. In this one, we'll call it payments for this one, and we're going to try and spell that correctly so it makes sense as well. Okay. So first thing we need to do, calculate the amount that we are going to go and allocate to each payment period. Once again, this is the easy part. Sale divided by payments, add column, standard, and divide. So there we go. We now have our amount. You could call it payment, you could call it whatever you want, doesn't really matter. What we need to do now is we need to figure out how do we actually create that list that happens every X number of days. And the secret to this one is actually very similar to what we just did with the previous example. We're going to create a custom column, and we're going to invoke the good old list.dates function. So this one I'm going to call date, and we're going to go list.dates. Now, once again, we're going to start at the start date. It's probably the easiest part. And then it says, okay, how many count do you want? Well, that's the number of payments, right? We need 3 of them, we need 1 of them, we need 4 of them. So we'll use that. This is the part that sort of becomes the tricky part of this whole thing, because we actually need a duration in order to get this done. Now, you might be tempted to go and actually say, well, Ken, you showed us before that we can use this hash duration. Oops. And maybe I need to open this up and start putting parameters in there, and that will work. But you don't actually need to do that. You can actually do this one here. You can go with duration.from. And interestingly enough, even though this is a whole number here and it doesn't have a comma 0, comma 0, comma 0 after it, you can actually feed this the frequency and close this up. Duration.from will actually convert a whole number into whatever that value is, comma 0, comma 0, comma 0, essentially. It will generate the duration out of it. So when you do this, you actually get a valid list. And what you can see is that it goes 15th, 29th, 13th. So that's 14 days apart. On this guy here, June 10th. Well, there's only one, so we can't tell if it's working for the 30 days apart. But this one, 7 days apart, from the 27th of June to July 4, 11, 18. Looks like it's working nicely here. So all we really need to do now is expand this to new rows again, and then once again, to be consistent, grab client, date, amount, right click, remove other columns, and then again, Control A, detect the data types. We've now done it based on the number of intervals, so X number of times across the number of intervals. I'm going to load this one to a table here so we can compare what we actually have here, and then we're just going to make a small data change and then a refresh on this. So here we go. We'll drop it down here. We can see the dates are different than what we have over here. Now I want to show you that I've done 5 different ways of allocating data. Let's go and take a look at what happens when we come back and set Pauline to have 2 periods. All right, so we're going to scroll over here so we can see all 5 of these outputs here. Of course, the yellow is not going to change because these are just standard flat tables, but all the green guys here hopefully will update. So let's do a data refresh all, and let's watch what actually happens as they come across. Okay. All 5 have been updated now. Now the first 2 don't change. Well, the reason being is because neither of these patterns required the periods. We're basically saying, hey, look, how many numbers of days are there between these individual things? Pauline, we haven't changed the months that have been assigned to in this particular case, so this is going to stay the same. But over here, we got another row inside our data. You'll notice that Pauline now has 2 records, and she's allocated $50 per period, just like everybody else. The reason being is because this was X number of months from the start date. So instead of being allocated over 1 month, it's now allocated evenly over 2. Likewise, in this example here, over X days, we've also gone, Pauline's got 2 records, June 10th and June 11th, with $50 per each one. And in our final example here, we've actually broken down Pauline's payment over 2 payments. that are actually coming, as you can see, from June 10th to July 10th are coming 30 days apart. So that's how these things actually do update and whatnot. And I will say that when I give the link to the organizers here and you guys download, the completed example of the workbook here with all of these queries is in it, so you can actually play around, change the data, do your refreshes, and see what happens. Okay, so there we go, folks. That is 5 ways from Sunday to go through and actually allocate all of the these different things. So thanks, Louise. Yeah, there's lots of fun tricks in this one here, and I'm actually really pleased to say that each of these examples, as I say, is included inside our new book, and the Power Query Academy is coming shortly, and recipe cards as well. There's a lot of good stuff there. This is stuff that I've been asked about for years. It wasn't in the original M is for Data Monkey, so I was really glad to get this into the new book. I'm going to run my slide deck out, and then we're going to jump back in. I know that there's some general questions and Q&A coming up as well. If you guys like the stuff that I do, please sign up for my newsletter. You get 4 free ebooks of my 4 or 5 favorite tips in each one of these programs. I tell you about courses that I'm doing, give you what's new in Excel, Office 365, and Power BI on a monthly basis. We tell you about new products, discounts, all those kind of good things. You can sign up for that here at excelguru.ca/newsletter. And again, this is in the slide deck that I'll share on the Meetup site later. And if you're ever looking to connect with me, this is just 5 of the different ways that you can actually find me. Although honestly, I'm all over the place. I'm everywhere. So if connect with me wherever. I mean, I love to chat with people. So. And on that note, that is hey, look at that, 9:02. I finished up in almost exactly an hour. That's almost unheard of. So there we go. I'm going to turn it back over now to the organizers of the sessions. I see Michael's on screen with me here. I'm actually going to stop sharing my slides so I can focus on the video aspect. And yeah, I'm happy to take any more questions along the way here. Michael, I know you guys have some for me as well, so fire away.
Whoa, thanks a lot for the very, very interesting use cases. In fact, it looked like this is the same Power Query I've been using. and I'm sure why people are also not. So 2 things actually today. We normally get double the number for this kind of session. We easily get 40 for this your kind of session. We notice the larger chunk of we have a community side, a community. So I can see that none of the about 20 or so people from that part joined today. I'm guessing they're all from the same company. Maybe there is a clashing event at the organization. But people do watch the recording, so I'll make sure they get the recording.
They missed out. If they went to another event, they chose poorly, didn't they? I mean, come on. Nah, it's all good. I mean, that's the beauty with recordings, right? Is you can always pick it up after the fact. So no big deal.
Okay, great. And just before I go to my own questions and questions from those my co-organizers, anybody in the house with questions? I see Christian, thanks a lot. You make this very interactive with some of the things you dropped in the chat box. I know some of the questions that have been asked in the chat box were not all the questions asked you've answered, but anyone wanting to ask any more questions before I go to my own set questions? Anyone? You can
and
even
unmute. You know what, Michael? Why don't we move to your questions? And I mean, if questions do come in from the chat as people as put them in, I mean, I'm happy to go back and answer those after as well. So no big deal.
Okay, great. That's a very good idea. So, Beno, what do you have?
Sorry, Michael.
Yes.
My chat is not working, but very quickly, I just want you to share the link to your book. Yes, there was a link at the beginning of the program.
Okay, so Ken, that's your book. Is it the one? Did you share the link of the book to be published? I thought it was a newsletter you shared. But do you get the link he's talking about?
Well, yeah, I do, but for some reason it is not working. So here, hang on a second. Let me just well, here, I'll tell you what. I'll just run over to the page and I'll go copy the link and drop it in the chat right now. That is not a problem. More than happy to do that. All right, so here is the book, and it is in PDF format at our site there, so you can pick it up. It's instant gratification. This one, you get it immediately, which is always good. So,
I have a question about the book also.
Cool.
Sure, fire away.
Is it still November 1st, the date for the printout?
Yes.
Earlier.
Amazon is still going to be shipping as of November 1st. Watch our newsletter to find out whether or not you can get it earlier than that, but I'm just not sure on international shipping through any other place. But I'm hoping to have some news where maybe you might be able to get it a little bit earlier within the next week or two. Depending on where it is. But for sure, the latest that it will be available for distribution from Amazon is November 1st. That is absolutely happening.
And
so,
Bill Gellan is not having separate copies before, right?
Like I say, stay tuned for some news, hopefully in the next week or two on that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my hope is that we're actually able to distribute a little bit before Amazon through Bill's site for physical copies. Yes. But I don't have a firm answer on that, and I don't believe I'm going to get one for about a week. It depends. So okay. I got to tell you personally, I cannot wait until I can get my hands on a physical copy. It's nice to have a PDF, but yeah, it's going to be nice to actually hold it. Louise asked, "What's the new content in the book?" Holy cow! Well, let's put it this way. Yeah, Christian says everything. The old one is 220 pages. The new one is 380 pages. So, I mean, if that gives you any idea, we talk a lot more about structuring. I mean, all of this allocation stuff was not in the first book. We have a lot of new data patterns, a more complete explanation of the M language, more on query folding and privacy. Did I have to rewrite it? Yes, we rewrote the entire thing from scratch. I believe there are 2 pages that didn't get rewritten, and they were in the introduction. And everything else was a complete and total rewrite. That's a big piece of why it took so long.
So. Not like his second.
Yeah, it was a big project, let me tell you. So we're super happy with it though.
Okay, so I'm happy that people are beginning to ask questions. So let me ask mine too. And it seems from what you said now, I was going to say in your first book, you had this paragraph where you said, blah, and I'm going to quote it, but now I'm going to say in both your first book and your second, I mean, in both the data, what's the new title now? So master your data with Excel and Power BI, and the M is for Data Monkey book. You had this paragraph where you said that, okay, I'm going to quote, understand that I'm not a normal Excel pro. I know enough SQL to be dangerous. I'm extremely accomplished with VBA and have working knowledge of VB.NET, C#, XML, and a few other languages. Well, just so that I don't take too much time, it's something that I've always, I'm happy that you're here and I can ask it. I keep looking at you and a few other people who I know also have this effect on me in terms of, I just can't imagine how one can know so much about so many. To someone out of the Excel and Microsoft analysis tool, they might not think it's so much because they don't know how deep most of these things are. But then when I see the depth of what you do, is it on the VBA side, the add-ins you create? We had a session maybe 3 months ago, about 3 months ago, that Matt Harlington was the guest, and he says the best person on Power Query that he knows is you. Like, he doesn't know anyone better than you on Power Query. And so that's how, it's not just an opinion that maybe me or a few people are having. It seems like something that it's really well corroborated by a lot of people. So my question is, how do you do it? How do you get to know so much about so much? And very
a lot of trial and effort and pain and success and failure and whatnot. Just for reference, I just want to just quickly throw a hat tip. I'm flattered to hear that from Matt. That's awesome. I mean, and for those of you who don't know, Matt is my partner at Skillwave, and I don't know anybody better at the DAX language than Matt Allington. So, you know, it's we have our different skills, but. And I'll also tell you that when we rewrote the book, I actually updated that section in there. Not very much of it. The one thing I changed was that I said that I'm actually pretty good in VB.net now as well. But as far as all the other skills that went into that, I mean, the reality is that you know, where did I learn and how did I get into that? I had a need. I mean, I've always enjoyed working with Excel. When I was working in industry as the before I was a controller, but as the accounting supervisor, we had a little challenge that we got dealt with, and I just started tinkering with VBA because we'd had an intern that had built a solution with VBA, and then they left the company, so I actually had to pick it up and try and learn a little bit about how to do it. I knew nothing about VBA in around 2000, well, I guess 1999 era. And so early 2000, I mean, I had to start playing around with it to maintain the spreadsheet somebody had thrown my direction. And I was starting to get into it because I realized that, like, hey, there's some power inside this thing to try and, you know, save me some time and whatnot. And if there's one thing that we'll say about me is that I am super lazy. I mean, efficient. I really like to make my computer work for me, not work for my computer. So, I mean, I'll spend hours of time to try and learn how to do things a little bit more efficiently. So we had our head office that came back and they said, look, you know, we've decided that we're going to put a staff cut into your administration, and you're going to lose a third of your staff by next week, but we're going to give you more work to do, tighten your deadlines, and all those kind of fun things that you look at and go, oh, wow, what am I going to do? And I went to my boss at the time and said, look, I think the secret is VBA. And he said, I don't know what else to do. So you go ahead and work on that. So I basically started to live in VBA. I mean, you know, 10 hours, 12 hours a day, and really fell in love with programming and what we could do in those areas. And I managed to, within a year, automate everything that we had done, plus a bunch more, and was able to start really experimenting with technology because I'd freed up a lot of time. So, I mean, you know, that led me into the ability to go and say, play with VB.net and play with Power Pivots and play with C# a little bit and play with some other things to try and figure out whether or not there were avenues that we could actually get those same kind of benefits back. I had a boss that was awesome and let me do that. I mean, and that was the big thing, that there's a lot of people that don't have that. But for me, it was, you know, cut off a little bit of time here, invest. It didn't come all at once. I mean, you know, the first month, I think I probably spent about, it feels like 3 weeks full time experimenting in order to save myself about 5 minutes. But the deal is that the next month end, it saved me 2 hours, and the next month end, it saved me 20, and the next month end, it saved me 40. Well, the job was a 40-hour job that had to be done within 30 hours. So it was getting that, you know, outside of the month end, spending the time to actually get your time back where you need it the most. And I don't know, after that, I mean, I'd say I got hooked, and I just keep on experimenting. And that's probably the big difference between me and a lot of people, is that once I get a solution, I don't stop poking it to see if there's a better way. I'll keep on investigating and looking and trying to find, could I do it better, and learning from other people out there. And I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice I'd give to anyone starting inside this industry today is, don't be satisfied, right? I mean, once you've figured something out, can you make your computer work for you? Can you learn a little bit here and a little bit there? Microsoft is putting so many different programming languages into so many different areas to help people out with this. And if you can start to chip away and learn one of those, you know, it's going to make a big difference. And go and find an online forum where people are doing that, to ask questions of them. The stuff you'll learn is amazing, and it'll totally change what you're doing for things. And it's, yeah, just awesome. I mean, fun stuff. So I could talk about this for days.
So I'm going to bring in another angle to the question. So what about visualizations? Because that's another thing. You see people who, they are good with formulas, they are good with what I know you are very, very good with, but then they are not also good with visualization. But you even go that far as even creating the tools, creating add-ins to help us do the charts that do not normally that, well, maybe now Excel is trying to catch up with you, but there used to be a time where when most of the charts your headings had were charts that Excel couldn't replicate easily. And how are you able to also be able to mix the internal, the plumbing, the underground work with the fancy things that you like? For me, I have that problem of I see myself more as someone who feels more comfortable with fighting with the data, with the formulas, with the things that are a bit like programming related. And then I'm looking for someone to push the the designs and all those ones too. But you seem to have all these in your corner. How do you do that?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, so here's the deal. I mean, for me personally, I mean, I'm much more comfortable in the data studio, messing around, getting the data right in the model and whatnot. My visualization skills, the stuff that I show to people, is the stuff that I've got right. I don't show the stuff that I got wrong. Not to say that, I mean, I can make some pretty cool visuals and different things, but they take me a lot more effort. And I think I'm in awe of people who can really visualize well very quickly. That just blows me away. But I think the thing that we need to realize and recognize about that is that, again, it's about learning and it's about exercising your brain, because the deal is that logic and analytics is one side of your brain and art is the other side of your brain. And charting is actually much more art than it is analytics. There's an analytical focus to it, right? How do you actually make it so that the message can be delivered efficiently? How can you make it so the message can be consumed that goes with it? But there is a huge artistic component there. And I will say that one of the things that I know as an accountant is that we spend our entire career being educated on logic and mechanics on how to get things done. And we beat creativity. I mean, not physically, but you get rid of the creativity from people, because in accounting particularly, creativity is seen as bad. I mean, one of those things that you look at is go, if somebody says I'm a creative accountant, I mean, that means they're doing really bad things and cooking the book, right? So, that's not what you want to see, except that we do need creativity, because otherwise, how do you actually generate and figure out and display that message to people so they understand what's going on? So, I will say that data visualization is one of those things that fascinates me. I don't think that it is my, I hesitate to ever rank anything from a 1 to 10 on your own skill set, but because I always rank myself as a 7 on everything, because I know lots, but there's always more to learn. But for me, visualization is one of those key areas where I still feel that I really want to get a lot better. I'm happy with the cool stuff that I can do, but I still feel that I could always be better. Not that I couldn't be better in all other areas as well, but you flatter me by saying I'm good at all these things. I'm not. It's just, I show you the good stuff so that you think I am. That's all.
Okay, so that I guess I'll follow your advice then. I'll try to, like you said, more of practice and being where these things are being done. So it's cool to hear that, at least a bit comforting that, okay, maybe even the best people to have a bit of combining all of these parts of our brain, making them work very well at once.
Well, you know what's interesting, like, I mean, I know you know this, but I mean, when you look at something like Excel, I mean, this program is so big, right? And you sit there, I mean, I have friends who I am absolutely in awe of what they can do with formulas. And, my formula game's pretty good. But when you got people that are actually coming in and they're building lambdas that return dynamic arrays that are doing like crazy, backflips of data, and I'm looking at going, what the heck is this? Like, it's cool that it works, but how does this work, right? And then you go out and you build like a cool dashboard or whatever, and then you go and you see somebody who does like just amazing work, and you're like, man, I never thought of doing that. And then you get into somebody who goes and they're putting out VBA that you look at and go, what does that even mean, right? Or there's so many different streams within Excel. And I mean, my sort of thing with the way that I kind of approach it is, I said that there's an expression, I don't know if this expression translates into other areas as well, but there was an expression called a jack of all trades but master of none. I've always said that I wanted to be a jack of all trades and master of one, and I decided that Excel was going to be the one thing that I mastered. But even within this program, there's so many different areas that I feel like I'm a jack of all trades and master of some, but not all, right? I mean, there's different pieces. Power query, hey man, that is my piece. If I need really advanced DAX, I go talk to my friend Matt. I can do a lot, but he can do all kinds of stuff. if I want visuals, well, we're talking to a guy right now about a visualization course as well on doing some really, really cool stuff. So there's a visualization aspect. If we're looking at VBA, I mean, you can go deep into that. You can go deep into dynamic arrays. You can go deep into lambdas. You can go deep into other formulas. There's so many pieces, and I just encourage people to start, experimenting with the parts that mean the most to them, and you'll find it. It's really, I don't know, it's a fun world to be in. I think this one is lots of flexibility.
Okay, great. And you've answered part of the questions that I have left. I hope you are still chanced. I know we've taken additional 20 minutes of your time, but are you okay with
good.
Okay, thanks a lot. So the two standard questions which you've answered some, one is you've told us a bit about your journey, but then I think I would like to ask it again, maybe in case there are some things you didn't say when you were answering the first question. So the first question from the two questions that we ask at the end for every presenter, and would like to hear your own answer, is how you got into this whole Excel. I know you said you had a career first as an accountant, so naturally Excel is one of those tools, but maybe before then, was it like you've always had a thing for data and that made you go into accounting, or we just want to see as far back when you are as normal as the rest of us, because now you're not.
Yeah, well, I mean, what got me going into accounting is, I always loved numbers and I love logic, and I ended up doing bookkeeping stuff way back in high school and really, really enjoyed it, and I thought that's what accounting was, and that's why I started pursuing accounting. I got schooled in that accounting is about a lot more than just debits and credits, but that's all good. But for me, what's interesting is, that was the onboard to what ended up becoming my career. And, I worked for a couple of different companies along the way. I worked for an orchid greenhouse. I worked for a golf course, and real estate development are the biggest ones. But, the part that I fell in love with was, and this is one of the things I think that's really, really important, is as you do your job, you always want to embrace the pieces that you really enjoy. And if you're not enjoying your job, you need to move to a different one, right? It's a big component is being happy in life and finding the things that are important to you. So I always go into all my jobs with the attitude, like, what can I make? I want to make the most of this and whatnot. And what I found is when I was working at the Orchid Greenhouse, they got me introduced to, hey, we need somebody who can help manage our network. Do you know anything about computers? I'm like, hey, I know something about computers. Sure, I'll be that. And I learned, how to do network administration on the job, which led to my second job when I was working, or not second, but it led to my next job working at the resort, where, I was hired as a systems administrator and accounting supervisor. So I got to manage the IT network, and as well as picking up these other tasks. So when that VBA job got thrown at me, even though I knew nothing about it, I was computer friendly enough to go, yeah, sure, what the hell, I'll take a look. Why not? Let's see what happened. And it was through that I discovered my real passion for actually playing around with these things. So, the big sort of component here is, I've naturally drifted from the pieces, the places that I thought I was going in life. My road has done one of these, right? It's kind of, it deviated a little bit and whatnot. And I chased the parts that I found fascinating and interesting as they came up. And, I see some comments coming in about Power Query and how, not enough people know about Power Query and whatnot. I was very, very lucky because of the fact that, I jumped into the whole spreadsheeting thing and got involved with Microsoft, that they brought Power Query out. And to the point where I was sitting in an MVP summit once, and they were asking me why I don't use pivot tables for something. And I said, well, because my data is not in an end user consumable format. And they were doing somebody should build a tool that would actually allow Ken to do that. Not nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And about 6 months later, they brought out the Data Explorer at the time, which was the precursor to Power Query. And I was like, you guys, you didn't tell me you already had this in a can. Like, that's really frustrating. But so I've been playing with Power Query since day one. And that was the part where, suddenly you're like, well, I didn't see this coming, but holy cow, this is going to change the world for people, because I know how hard the job is in accounting and whatnot. And then I discovered as I was going through this that I actually really like telling people and showing people examples, and that's where I sort of become this trainer. So the road's been kind of circuitous, but it's been fun. And I think that's one of the big things here is that, you may start doing one thing, but things end up changing and going in different directions. And, you got to enjoy the journey and figure out, how it's going. So it's lots of fun. Yeah. I mean, so as Luis is saying, right? I mean, people grab that, but they're afraid to learn stuff. They prefer the hardware. You know what? I meet people like that. I'm proud to say that not many of them are my clients, because I like the people who are trying to get better with this stuff. But it is tough. I hear you, and I don't understand that. I say, to me, it's all about trying to get better, right? But there you go. So
the last question is, what advice would you have for someone starting out right now? So think about someone who is in his first job or just finishing college and has an interest in this, but then, like an advice on how to become, in quotes, someone who is internationally known and very well good in what he does in this space of what we all do. But now factoring all what is new now in terms of, there's a whole lot of distractions from tools saying you're going to be the one to put Excel under the ground, and like Excel is dying, and so what's your advice as regards the way to go about this field nowadays?
So that's a tough one, because I mean, there's two different questions I think that you're sort of looking at in those, right? I mean, and I guess the question is, I mean, if the advice is, I mean, how do you get better with Excel, or is the advice of, hey, you want to become if I can use this term loosely, an internationally recognized superstar or whatever else? I mean, what's the focus you're looking for? So if you want to get better, I mean, basically the deal is that, I mean, I think you go and you attend these meetups, you go and you challenge yourself, you try and do new things. I mean, I'm a big believer that every week you should set aside some time to try and do something different and try and learn something new. That was really the secret to my success, was that I actually was given the time to do that. Sometimes that's your own time in the evenings, but it's about, learning and look at the different presenters that you have that are giving out their content for free, or buy some of the content that they put out there in different cases, and learn from them, learn from multiple people. And I mean, this is a big thing that I would say that, I mean, if you learn Power Query from me, you should also learn it from some others out there. I mean, Minda Tracy, Leila Garani. I mean, there's lots of other folks out there that are doing this, but that way you get multiple different perspectives from what you're dealing with. And that's actually one of the cool things that we have baked into our Power Query Academy at Skillwave, is that you've got myself and Matt Allington and Miguel Escobar that are all giving you content that we do things in different ways, and that way you actually learn more. So that's the first part, right? Never be satisfied. Always challenge yourself and try and get the opinions from different people and ask questions and whatnot. The second part is, I mean, if you actually want to be doing like what I do, what you do, where we actually go and talk to people and do presentations, I mean, all you got to do is put your hand up and ask, hey, can I come and present for your user group? I mean, you've got your group, and I mean, I know, like, for you, it's like, look, and myself as well, I love it when people come to me and say, hey, I'd love to speak for you. We're like, come on in, absolutely. I mean, the Vancouver Power BI user group, we're looking for speakers all the time. The reality is that I actually want to see a new crop of people come up through this stuff to actually start sharing, what they're doing, because again, more people is more different ways of dealing with things. I'm really proud of the material that I put together, but I know that there's other ways that I've never thought of. One of the big things where I get my content is by talking to people who ask me questions and challenge me on things. I'm like, I'd never thought of that. Let me build an example for that. Next thing you know, it becomes your newest favorite example you like to show people, right? So, the big thing that I would say is try and find a speaking slot somewhere. Do half an hour. I mean, you don't have to do a full hour on it, but share the stuff that you do. And it's a phenomenal world we live in right now. You can do this through Teams and whatnot, and everybody's always interested. Don't be shy. It takes time to become comfortable presenting. Be nervous, make your notes, like, have all that stuff. But honestly, the more you do it, for me personally, I say the more fun I've had. I mean today, well, when we're not fighting under the whole COVID thing, I mean, my normal job is I get to travel around the world and meet people face to face and actually, do this stuff. I mean, I've been able to go to a whole bunch of countries and see a whole bunch of different people and realize that the data problems that people are facing are exactly the same, whether you're in Bulgaria or Canada or Australia or Argentina, it doesn't matter. I mean, data is data and whatnot. So it's I don't know. It's a fun thing to do. And I mean, I would just encourage people to step up and give it a try. And if you don't like it, you'll find out pretty quick. And if you do, you know what? It'll drive you to get better, because you'll get questions from people as you're presenting that like my friend Christian who says there's not many stupid questions. I mean, sometimes there are, but most of the time they actually lead to something really cool, even if they are, not whatever. I like to think that they're not stupid questions. They're questions from people who don't realize what's actually out there and are at the beginning of their learning journey, right? And that's where it really comes down to with a lot of this stuff is everybody's just trying to learn and get better. So it's a fun thing. So Luis is telling me I should do a presentation in Power Query for accountants. I do that, man. I got that all the time. So and Luis also plays around with Power Query and DAX on the weekends. I mean, who doesn't, right? Honestly, who doesn't? So
thanks a lot again, and maybe I'll share your Power BI. I think you have 2 user groups, right? There's the one Power BI.
We've got one. We do the Vancouver Power BI and Modern Excel user group. It's one user group, but we actually run 2 tracks per month. We do an Excel track on the first Thursday of the month, and we do a Power BI track on the 3rd Thursday of the month. And it's all online at this point in time, and we record them all. They're on my YouTube channel as well. So, but we'd love to have more people come and see our speakers and whatnot. I've got the Excel team coming up in our next session talking about modern collab, and then I've got Peter Myers coming from Australia. For we get good speakers all the time, and we're always looking for others to try their hand at as well. So my big thing is I don't want to be the main speaker all the time on my own platform. We're actually trying to share it out there and get different opinions. Although I'll say it's been interesting. Every now and then I've actually had to go back and insist that I get onto my own platform because we've had such a great run of speakers. So, but yeah.
Thanks a lot. I'm sharing the meetup link to the Vancouver Power BI and Modern Excel user group now. And with that, we're going to close today's session. It's been very enlightening, very, I would say entertaining, because everything I kept seeing today kept giving me ideas. Oh, I could have used this there. I think of somewhere I'm going to use this. And so it's all been educative and entertaining to me. And I'm sure it's been similar for the guests, the participants. And so, Ken, thanks a lot. We're very grateful for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Maybe this is smaller than the crowds you're used to.
That's all good. They'll catch it on the recording. It's all good, Michael. I'm not worried about that. But thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun. It's a great opportunity to show off some new content that we've been playing around with. So I've quite enjoyed it. So
thank you. So thank you once again, and thanks to everyone, Christian, Claudia, Oguchi, everyone, both those who spoke and those who didn't say anything. So bye-bye and have a nice
awesome
week ahead. Thanks.
All right. Talk to you later, folks.